There he is. Let's just watch.
That's good? Thanks.
Wow. What do you say? You know, this is a man, as Yodit was mentioning, Bill Cosby in handcuffs being led away to jail. Will we rack it? Here he is. A scene millions of Americans never, ever, ever would have imagined. Never would have imagined, as we were just discussing. This is Mr. Huxtable. This is Picture Pages. This is a man who, you know, did so much philanthropically, and wow, his life has entirely changed. Let's listen in.
In the hall. Is that okay? You're just going to do a quick one here. Yeah, but you can say something quick too here if you want to. But the whole victim impact will be in the hall. Fair enough? Okay. All right. All right. Ready? Okay, wait. All right. We're ready? Everybody, wait. Okay. Okay. We're going to make a very brief statement here, and then we're going to give victim impact statements in the hall, in Xavier Hall at 410 Erie, after the district attorney's press conference. You ready? Yeah. Okay. So this has been a long journey to justice for all of the accusers, particularly for Andrea Constant and for her family. And we respect the fact that they have undergone and endured this journey to justice. The court has imposed a 3 to 5 year term, 3 years after which he can seek parole. This is a very important day. Judgment Day has come. The court has said that its efforts and its decision were based on the guidelines and the law of Pennsylvania and the protection of the public, that there's an undue risk to the public if he was given probation, and given the gravity of the offense and other factors, this was his sentence. So we're glad the Judgment Day has finally come for Mr. Cosby. Mr. Cosby has shown no remorse, and there has been no justice for many of the accusers who were barred from a court by the arbitrary time limits imposed by the statute of limitations. But many of them were brave enough to speak to law enforcement, and some of them were chosen to testify as prior bad act witnesses. So we are very proud of those who cooperated with law enforcement and did what they could do to have a just result. Very quickly, we're going to make a longer statement at the hall. I don't know if you want to say anything about the sentence only and how you feel about it, and then we'll do the victim impact at the hall. This is Shalon Lasha. Shalon is one of my clients. She testified in the criminal case as a prior bad act witness. Go ahead, Shalon.
Well, as everyone knows, I wanted 30 years. But I'm very happy to know that Mr. Cosby will do time in prison, that he is touchable like he touched us unwillingly. This is
okay.
All right.
Good. Thank you.
We've got justice.
All right. Lee Slott-Lubin, who was also a prior bad act witness. Again, we'll give her a longer statement at the hall, which we have a copy of for you. But how you feel about the sentence right now?
I'm more emotional than I thought I would be. And all I can say is that this is going to help change the statute of limitations in Nevada. We're going to get it abolished, and we're going to support what's happening here in Pennsylvania. And this is just going to show victims that they can make it through. and that there's justice at the end. And hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Okay, we'll see you at the hall right after the DA's press conference. Thank you. Yes. Okay, everyone's invited, and we'll have a longer victory.
So we can get into Mr. White, just a couple words? We will.
I wanted Tom Martin to hold it. Tom ain't nowhere around. I would prefer Tom to hold it. And maybe I could. Tom!
I think it sends an important message, although that's not what the court was intending to do, but it certainly sends a message that you will suffer the consequences if you are convicted in a court of law of drugging.
Never expected you to see Mr. Cosby go to prison. No one ever expects anything like this, but I want to say a few words, if that's okay. I believe and think it is important to point out that this has been the most racist and sexist trial in the history of the United States. Dr. Cosby has been one of the greatest civil rights leaders in the United States for over the last 50 years. He has also been one of the greatest educators of men and boys over the last 50 years. This was not pointed out to the jury or allowed in court because the racist and sexist mass media was attacking and denouncing Dr. Cosby whenever his lawyers even hinted there was racist and sexism present. All three of the psychologists who testified against Dr. Cosby were white women who make money off of accusing black men of being sexual predators. It is no accident that the prosecutor still worked so close with anti-black and anti-male activist groups who tried to extort $100 million from Dr. Cosby in 2014 and continues to produce racist and sexist publicity against him through the 35 clients. What is going on in Washington today with Judge Kavanaugh is part of that sex war that Judge O'Neill, along with his wife, are a part of. Regarding the psychologist Kristen Dudley, she is a practitioner of mindfulness. This is an Eastern-inspired practice that is controversial in the field of psychology. I have noticed that a number of accusers also produced it, and I believe that AC and Judge O'Neill conspired with this. As you learned today, and we will prove that the DA of Montgomery County used falsified evidence against Dr. Cosby. During both trials, Mr. Steele introduced what he claimed was an accurate recording of conversations between Gianna Constant and Mr. Cosby. After recently being investigated by my associate, Ebony Benson, and her team, they found out that the tapes had been tampered with. The tape that Gianna Constant played in the courtroom that she recorded Mr. Cosby on. Mr. Cosby retained a forensic expert to conduct analysis of the recording. The forensic expert has now confirmed that the tape was manipulated in two places. The expert, in her own words, concluded, without question, this is not an authentic recording. Mr. Cosby's defense team is preparing a motion to address Mr. Steele's use of falsified evidence. Mr. Cosby clearly has been denied his right to a fair trial. These injustices must be corrected immediately. Mr. Cosby doing great. Ebony Benson is going to read a statement from Mrs. Cosby.
Where's Camille? I got it. I'm here to read an official statement from Mrs. Camille O. Cosby concerning the prosecution's use of falsified evidence. The right to a fair trial is of utmost importance in the American justice system. Prosecutors, as administrators of justice, have a responsibility to protect the innocent and are prohibited from offering any evidence that is untrue. We have now learned and will prove that Bill Cosby was denied his right to a fair trial because the DA of Montgomery County, Kevin Steele, used falsified evidence against him. After being tipped off by a recent online publication that a tape recording Mr. Steele played during trial was doctored, Mr. Cosby retained a forensic expert to conduct an audio authenticity analysis of the recording. Gianna Constan, the mother of Andrea Constan, had surreptitiously and illegally made the recording of Mr. Cosby in 2005 without his knowledge or consent. That recording was provided to Bruce Castor while he was DA of Montgomery County. Mr. Castor determined that Gianna Constan's surreptitious recording constituted a potential felony under Pennsylvania's law, which required Ms. Constan to obtain Mr. Cosby's consent to the recording. Years later, in 2014, Kevin Steele beat Mr. Castor for DA by unethically attacking him for not prosecuting my husband. He thereafter used the illegal recording in both trials, claiming that it was an authentic recording of the 2005 conversation. Mr. Steele relied heavily on the recording in both trials, ultimately convincing the jury in the second trial to return a verdict of guilty. Earlier this month, on September 12, 2018, an online publication reported that a Montgomery County court official who requested anonymity had revealed that the original recording made by Gianna Constan was doctored and contained information that would exonerate Mr. Cosby. The defense team immediately sent its copy of the recording to a forensic expert who, after extensive analysis, has unequivocally concluded, quote, "This is not a true representation of the original content or conversation. Without question, this is not an authentic recording," end quote. At no time before or during the trial did the DA disclose that the recording was inauthentic, much less that it had been falsified. After the media report surfaced on September 12th, Montgomery County detectives acknowledged and confirmed to the defense team that they could not authenticate the recording and did not know who made the original recording. Mr. Cosby's defense team will be filing a motion seeking immediate relief for the prosecution's use of this falsified evidence. The DA's use of this falsified audio clip at trial is deeply prejudicial, yet it represents just one of many issues that resulted in the denial of Mr. Cosby's right to a fair trial. These egregious injustices must be corrected. Thank you.
Mr. Cosby's doing great, and Mr. Cosby knows that God is watching over him. He knows that these are lies. They persecuted Jesus, and look what happened. Not saying Mr. Cosby is Jesus, but we know what this country has done to black men for centuries. So Mr. Cosby's doing fine. He's holding up well. And everybody who wants to say anything negative, you're a joke as well. Thank you. Did you sexually assault women, Michael? Thank you.
Okay, so that was Bill Cosby's publicists speaking out on what they're referencing, falsified evidence, this audio tape. They're filing this motion. It's complicated. Gene Casares, who's been in this courtroom and has all this extraordinary color from the sentencing. Gene, if I can just ask you first to address what we just heard from the Cosby publicist team on this audio clip. Talk to me about that. Explain that.
What they're talking about is that it is the audio tape that Andrea Constan's mother made of Bill Cosby when he called her to try to talk about what had happened with Andrea. She had gotten a tape recorder and she recorded it. It was evidence in this trial. There are some beeps in that recording, and the defense, and it was actually a couple of days ago, they sent the tape to an audio specialist who looked at that tape forensically and believes that it was altered. Those are the facts that the defense says are true at this point. So when the judge announced 3 to 10 years in state prison, the defense jumped up and it immediately in that courtroom started talking about this audio tape, and everyone is like not understanding what he's talking about. And then he asked a motion for bail pending appeal on many issues, one being this issue. Obviously, that did not work. The judge researched it, and the severity of this crime, the prison sentence that was given, he has to be remanded into custody, as you saw. You know, as I sat in the courtroom, and the judge sort of led everyone through, including Bill Cosby, what he was going to do. And he did say that time in state prison, which is the most serious punishment in Pennsylvania, there's a county facility, but state prison, most serious, that is what is appropriate. This was a serious crime, the judge said. This is a serious sexual assault. He said that he really took into consideration the victim impact statements, notably that of Andrea Constand. The judge said, you took her young spirit and you crushed it. He talked about how it was planned, that he got the drugs, he had the drugs, that he administered them to her. Cosby had said in his deposition that he believed she consented because there was silence. The judge said to Cosby this afternoon, she couldn't respond to you. She was unconscious. She was drugged. And then you sexually assaulted her. He talked about that Bill Cosby had to have remedial training in prison. He had to have courses and remedial about sexual assault, that he had not taken one step on the outside to take any type of responsibility whatsoever, coursework, therapy, anything, because of this. He said that he had to take into consideration the protection of the public, that Bill Cosby is still a risk to the public. I saw Bill Cosby sit there in silence. I didn't hear anything in the courtroom. In the front row, you had Andrea Constand, her mother, her father, her sister. They were silent. The second row, you had the prior bad act witnesses. At one point, after the judge started talking, I heard some voices. It was Janice Dickinson. I don't know what she was saying, but it was audible. And one of the court deputies came over and sternly told her to stop it. And then he said something else, and one of the prior bad act witnesses said something, and he said, you take her out then. But she stayed in. And what we all witnessed together, we saw Bill Cosby take off his suit jacket. He took off his tie. He had his suspenders and his shirt on, so he obviously knew not only that he was going to be remanded into custody, but he was going to be handcuffed. At the end, we were all ushered out, but we stood there in the hallway, and outside of our presence is when the handcuffs were put on him, but we all watched as he came out, and he came before a live camera, the pool camera in the hallway, and he was walked out. And now I understand the PIO of the prosecutor's office tells me that he is immediately being transported to the county facility, which is where processing will take place. That can take up to days because they have to find the prison that is best for him to go. 3 to 10 years. He will be in there at least for 3 years.